All right. All right. So the next one, no recording. I mean, we are recording, so if you don't like it, like Santosh said. Second one is when you're not talking or having a question. Next, this is our .NET Orlando Code OneTug board. Santosh is our fearless leader, and Andy, he couldn't make it this morning. He has internet issues. There's Tim, myself, Tanner, and our member at large is Brian Bishopper. Brian used to be a board member. He got really busy though. These are the ways you can reach us if you would like to reach us. Best way to probably hitting us up on Twitter. So, and all of our meetings are posted on the meetup at OneTug, meetup.com at onetug.org. Our upcoming meetings, we have a July 1st using source generators, developing great web APIs is July 15th, and July 27th is introduction to actor model. Okay, so those are our upcoming meetings. Did you want me to show here we go. If you want to become a monthly sponsor, we'll be happy to take your money and put you up on our sponsor board. If you're looking for, we're looking for fun. If you want to chip in, you can always chip in at Secure Meetup at OneTug. Contribute. Any announcements from our community? If you want to unmute, if you have any announcements.
Yes, I have an announcement. So most people are aware of this, but the Windows event is happening at 11 a.m. Eastern, US Eastern time today. So make sure that after this call, you attend that one, because there's quite a lot of announcements from Microsoft about Windows. So
yes.
We haven't had any Windows announcements in a long time. So
yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Today's agenda is this. We'll be, like I said, the talk is being recorded, and Layla will be online here. We'll be here in just a minute. She's going to talk about Azure Functions. But here's Layla's bio. We'll let her talk. We'll let her introduce herself. And that's about it. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Layla, let's see if I can find the button. So it's up to you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Right, let me just see if I need to go into the window mode. There we go. Alrighty, so hopefully everyone can see my screen now. It should be Azure Functions in front of you. So thank you very much for the introduction there, Todd. So this is a guide to getting started with Azure Functions. I always have problems with this. There we go. So my name's Layla. I am a Microsoft MVP for developer tech. I'm a GitHub star. I also sit on the board of directors at the .NET Foundation, and I organize a meetup group very similar to this one, only I don't think I'd get anybody to come at 8 a.m. So I'm pretty impressed with you all. So thank you very much for joining me with your morning coffee. So let's have a little chat about Azure Functions. This is what the MS docs say. It could actually be their sales spiel, but it says develop more efficiently with functions, an event-driven serverless compute platform that can also solve complex orchestration problems. Build and debug locally without additional setup, deploy and operate at scale in the cloud, and integrate services using triggers and bindings. So that doesn't really give you any inclination to get started. I don't think. It's like, oh yeah, okay, that sounds kind of fun. Not really. Yeah, okay. So I want to show you how I like to use them and why I find them so much fun. So a little bit of history about them. They originally released in March 2016. So they've been around 5 years now. And the original Azure Functions, I think you can still use them, but you couldn't develop locally with them. They were completely in the Azure portal. You had some weird JSON to bring in, all your usings and all your setup there, and you tested them in the cloud. And they were just a little bit cumbersome. They were still quite good. Well, for me, for doing demos, for when I worked for Twilio, I could do lots of quick demos using them and get telephones going through them. So I thought they were quite fun. But for business use, having something that you can't put in, your local code repository, wherever that is, so source control of any sort, or develop locally and test in an isolated place, having it on an Azure portal, well, how do several developers work on that at once? It just wasn't great, but it was a great first stab at it. And then in September 2018, Azure Functions 2.0 came out with the ability to develop locally, which was like amazing. And it actually took me quite a while, longer than I would like to switch over from the Azure portal ones to the 2.0. And when I did, I was like, why did I wait so long? This is fantastic. And then last year in 2020, in January, we got 3.0. Now, you can develop very similarly to any other .NET C# function. Oh, that's the other thing. They're not just C#. There's Java, there's Python, there's JavaScript. There's a whole host of PowerShell languages you can use with functions. I'm going to show you C. I'm getting to. I'm going to show you C#. My God, I will get those words out. And we can have a look at that. But you can use other languages with them. And I've lost my thread now because I got so tangled up in my words there. But we'll forget that. And we'll go on and see how I like to use them. That's easier because my brain just had a complete meltdown with those words, obviously. So why functions? Now, traditionally, we could have, that was it. I was talking about architecture. So you can develop them very similarly to any ASP.NET web application. With some caveats, because not everything works. You can develop them with .NET 5 now. Again, I've had some difficulties with .NET 5 getting them to work. There were some older problems with Newtonsoft.json. They have more or less been resolved now. They were limiting the version that you could use. So there were some conflicts if you wanted to use other features and things. But all in all, they're pretty similar. And even if you've looked into Blazor static web apps, the template from Microsoft on GitHub actually has a Blazor static web app with Azure Functions behind as the API, which I think is really cool. And some people have asked me, why would you use a web API application over Azure Functions? Well, there's a lot of compelling reasons to use Azure Functions over a web API application, but it really comes down to your availability or the application's availability, what you've already got hosted, what you need it to do, and et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully some of that will come more clear as we go through and I show you the different uses and what Azure Functions has behind the scenes. So if we just go, why functions? Well, if you think about some legacy systems, some big monolith kind of systems, they might even be on framework still. I'm sure there's a plethora of applications.
Hey, Layla,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think I am only seeing the slide with introducing you. I'm not seeing any slides advance. Is that supposed to be that way?
Oh, interesting. So you're not.
We are able to see
Hey,
the slide.
Santosh, yeah, we are able to see that, Santosh. Her slides have been advancing. She was on the slide which said why functions. That's
Okay.
well,
Sorry, then it's probably me. I'll drop and join. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Thank you. All right. So I'm very happy if there's something goes wrong with the slides, do just let me know, because there's no point me prattling on with you going, what is she talking about? So thank you for checking. So let's think.
I'm sorry, I don't see the slides as well. It's just your face. I mean, your introduction. So it wasn't only one person.
think you probably need to advance. Sorry, I can hear myself. You can advance sometimes on the top, and Teams doesn't always refresh the view, I found. So as long as the vast majority can see the slide with Y functions on it now, I think we're probably okay. It could just be your local thing. So maybe, I don't know, drop out and come back in again. Let's see. I've got chat up now, so okay, let's go and see. All right. So I'm not going to be showing anything for now. So whilst you sort stuff, I'll be talking about where you might want to use Azure Functions. So let's think about this legacy system that could be on framework. It could just be in a state of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And you don't really want to add new features. You don't want to update it. There's no real business need to update this application to the latest and greatest framework. And you know, there's no point in needlessly upgrading applications that are stable and you're not really actively developing on them. But what happens if you do want to actively develop on them? You may not want to go in and revamp and refactor the whole application and upgrade it. You may have time critical features you need to get out. The business owners may be like, no, just leave it as is. So how do you get the latest features that you want to develop with into this old application without breaking everything? Well, that's where I see Azure Functions coming in. That you can go and create a little tiny application, self-contained, that can serve your megalith one, okay? So that as long as it can make an HTTP call to it, you can have this feature in something else. Now, if you do come to upgrade your application, you can either keep using this small feature satellite, or you can bring it into the code base without, you know, having to rewrite it. So all new code could be in little satellites of Azure Function mini apps or microservices. And then your main application can be using all of those. So that's where I see a lot of developers getting into Azure Functions to create new features. They're also really awesome for testing out new, like in a Spike. If you want to go and explore something, you can go and do it very easily in an Azure function without a whole load of setup and overhead. So let me skip on again. All right. So how does an Azure function work? Your function will need a trigger. Now, there's lots of ways that they can be triggered. Let's take an HTTP trigger. So an application or Postman or a webhook or something will call an HTTP endpoint, and that is your trigger. So what happens when that happens? Your Azure functions, generally, I'll put a caveat there, which we'll talk about later, they're not running all the time. They are on demand. So if your application hasn't been up and running, your function, what happens when a trigger comes in? So Azure must allocate your application to a server with capacity. So the trigger comes in, it goes, oh, I don't have this function running. Let's find a server to stick it on. And then that server needs the functions runtime to be able to run your application. So it has to start up that runtime. And only once those two steps have gone, will your code execute. And that's known as the cold start. And that's been oh my God, Azure functions have a cold start. Now, really, in practice, it's not that terrible. And you know, it really depends on your use case. But what Azure have done to make this experience a little bit better is, instead of starting from scratch every time, finding the server with capacity, starting the runtime, they have a pool of servers kept warm with workers already with the runtime on them. So that means that when your trigger fires, that it has to only find one of these workers that's already hot to trot with the runtime going, and it can execute a lot faster. And that's known as pre-warmed rather than cold. You can have like a hot start, but that's more of a paid for premium service. And there's not really, if that's your concern, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. So there's lots of things that you can do to trigger and keep them hot. But in theory, I'll share a link to a complete analysis of the hot and cold starts, and you'll see that the time basis really isn't something to be concerned about in general. So you can see that you've got your Azure allocates your application to a server, the startup with the runtime, and then your code executes. And then they stay alive for, I think, about 15 minutes before they're deallocated. Now, if you want to run the Azure functions locally, there's a few things, different ways that you can do it. So you can use Visual Studio or Rider, and you can just create a new project from within your chosen IDE. You can also use Azure Functions CLI tools, and you can use that with VS Code. So if you're happy working with code, you can use the Azure Functions CLI to create them, or you can just use your CLI, just like you might use the .NET CLI. Now, what you do need is storage emulation. Azure Function applications are stored in blob storage on Azure. So you need an emulator locally to stick your application in, and it runs from there. Now, on Windows, generally you will get the storage emulator. If you are on Mac or Linux, you will need Azurite. And I believe that everything is moving over to Azurite. It's cross-platform. It's got a lot of functions into it. But don't worry, if you're using an IDE, you'll get storage emulator with it. So you don't have to worry if you're on Windows. But if you're on Mac or Linux, you'll want to go and find Azurite. Excuse me. So those are the sort of things that you need and how you can get started. So the Azure Functions Core Tools CLI allows you to develop and test your functions on your local computer. It will connect to Azure services. So you can bring in the Azure CLI, and then you can use the Function CLI and the Azure CLI, which is the AZ prefix, in conjunction, and deploy everything in from the CLI, which is quite useful. You can also debug locally using the full functions runtime and deploy your function app to Azure. So you can use them in conjunction once you've got the Azure, the AZ bit into it. You need to add all of your configuration and everything. So there's a little bit of setup, but it's all quite clear if you follow the Microsoft docs on how to get that up and running. So I thought it was best if I actually showed you what it looks like in code, just to get started with an Azure function. So the first thing we'll do is take a look in here. And once you've got the Azure Functions Core Tools in, let me just make that much bigger. I usually make theirs much bigger. There we go. When you go func, you can see, I'm going to zoom out again now. Come on. You get the cool Azure Functions logo in ASCII art, and then it gives you all of the help that you need. So, durable extensions, Kubernetes, templates, you've got all the different things that you want to get started. And then when you come and create one, which I think we do with, I can remember it because it changes from everything. We can do create a new function. I think it's just new. Oh, it's there on the side. Or there. So if we cd into my repos, and do I have functions on here? Let's see, what do I have? Let's put it in demos. Oh, Azure Functions, how about that? cd Azure Functions. And if we go func init, now you can see straight away we've got some options for the different languages. So if we go .NET, just on that first one, I think I can go like that. And enter. It's going to do some stuff, hopefully. Yep. So it's written that, and it's got everything there ready in that repo. So if I go and check that, oh, that's the wrong one. That's on my host machine. So if I go in here, it just stuck it right in there because there was a whole load of other things in there. So I can go and delete that. Oh no, wrong button. Let's go. You can see it's stuck that all in like so. So we should have put that in a folder, but you get the idea. Now, if you are in an application, let's just open up Visual Studio. So once you've created that, you can then start adding in triggers, etc. and etc. Yes, I am rocking the Windows terminal there. I do quite like it. So I like iTerm on the Mac. So this is like quite a similar use. Okay, so we are going to create a new project. And if we come up here, oh, I've got it favorited. Good. We can just choose Azure Functions and then press the next button. And then I want to stick this in my Azure Functions folder. It's just going to be Function App 1, and we can create. Now, this is where we get all the triggers. I should be able to use .NET 5 here, as you can see. I'm just going to leave it on .NET Core 3 just for simplicity, because 5, as I said, there are some things that I've had go wrong for me, and that might be just my local environment or me, and that's not to say there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just going to play it safe for a demo. So you can create an empty one, which is what we did on the CLI. But then you can see we've got service bus queue triggers. We've got an HTTP trigger with OpenAPI, which is new, which is very exciting. Timer triggers are great for things that you need to happen regularly. Queue triggers, blob triggers, event grid. You get the idea. There are IoTs, so many different triggers in here to have a play with. But we're just going to be very, very boring and go with this HTTP trigger. Over here, you can see we're just going to use storage emulator, and that's where you could set up Azure right if you had it running. Don't worry about the authorization level. For local development, it doesn't matter, and you can change it once it's created. So let's go and create this. Okay. So before we get stuck into that, let's have a look at the Solution Explorer. Let's pin that. So it's created a project, and this very similar to all the other applications we create these days. If I can find the edit button, edit. Oh, that's because I'm on the solution. Edit project file. You can see it looks very similar to Web API or any of the others. You can tell it the version here, v3. You could upgrade it to .NET 5. It tells you what it's already got, your NuGet packages in here, and a whole load of stuff. Local.settings.json, let's have a look at that, because that's a little bit interesting. Local.settings.json, and I'll show you this on the next demo that we have, is where you can put all your local settings, but you could be putting secrets in there. So the people over creating this template have actually included a git ignore from the start here, and you can see they're saying ignore local.settings.json, don't dox this user, which is very kind of them. So if you wanted good practice here, if you were going to commit this, you'd have your secrets in here. That's not best practice though, because I'll show you more about this. But let's say you're putting your secrets in here, your connection strings for whatever. Then you would duplicate this and have local.demo.settings or something of that name that you would commit, so that when someone comes and pulls down this application or clones it, they know what their local settings should look like. It would just be blank, but they're like, okay, I need all of these keys and connection strings to make the application work. So that's just something to bear in mind, that this won't be committed. Now we can see we've got our function app here. This is, let me close all of these. And we have the function name. This can be anything. And this is what your API endpoint will look like. And I'll show you in Postman how we call that. It comes in with this trigger here. We've got authorization level. And this is how you would access it. Now, there's some thoughts I'll share about this later on. And you can see here we have admin, anonymous, function, system, and user. And this only comes into play once it's deployed. So let's just leave it on function. And here you can say the methods this particular function will accept. It'll accept both get and post. You can have either or as well. And then you can specify a route. If you don't like the default route, which will be /API/trigger in this case, you can specify a route here. We get the HTTP request coming in, and we get iLogger. Now the template is really nice because it sets it up with how to get from the URL and also from the body. And then it does that and it will send you a message. So let's just press play and see what happens. So pressing play. You can see it's starting the storage emulator. And we get a console app up here. And what it will do is it will print out all of your functions. So you can see we called that one trigger in the decorator there. And that's what it goes and calls. Now you can see it accepts get and post. Let's copy that and go over to Trusty Postman. And let's just call that. And you can see it was triggered successfully, but pass a name through. So we can see down here, just out of the default, it's teaching you how to use them. If that was null, if we didn't get a name off the body or the query string, we just ask them for it. So here we can see, let's go name equals Layla. And that's the get. If we send that, you can see it's grabbed, the code's grabbed my name off it and that. Now, if we change this to a post, let's just test that with no body. You can see it hasn't got the name. And if we go over to the body, let's go raw, set it as not JavaScript, Layla, JSON. And I go and give it some valid JSON. So we go name. And just so you know, I'm not treating. Let's go. Let's say Todd was using this. And we fire that. You can see it's plucking it out. So I think this is pretty nice way of just getting started and seeing how you can start grabbing things off the HTTP request body and just start having a play. So first thing you want to do, grab this, start it up, have a play, do some fun things with it. And that's a pretty easy way to start learning with Azure Functions. Okay, so I'm going to close that one down and we'll just head over to the code, the slides again. Does anyone have any questions so far? I haven't seen any coming up, so alrighty. So
one question. Can we connect with our databases, or does it recommend it for this type of function apps?
Yes, I will show you stuff in this next one now, and you'll start to get the aha moment, I hope. Because now you're like, yeah, that's all well and good now, but how do I use it as an actual system?
Exactly.
And that's why I want to show you more than a demo. That's great, just get started and learn with that one. But let's see something that's a real life use case. I'm going to show you the transcription service. Okay, so let's have a look at this. We have any old app over here, and we're going to upload an audio file. Now that upload is going to hit an HTTP trigger. This particular service has 3 endpoints. Well, two endpoints, 3 functions. So we have an upload trigger, sorry, an HTTP trigger that's taking an upload. We have blob storage that it writes the audio file to. And then we're using a blob trigger. So this is another Azure function type, and this is blob trigger. So when something happens in a particular container within our blob storage, it triggers this. And what that does is it sends off the audio file to the speech-to-text API, and it writes to table storage. And then the third trigger is a webhook one, and when the speech-to-text API has finished, it calls the webhook, which returns the transcription. So this is like quite a viable real life situation. Speech to text takes some time. So you don't, I think it's about 30% of the overall length of the clip. So if you've got a 10-minute audio clip, it takes about 3 minutes to transcribe. So you don't really want to be hanging around doing that. You want to fire and forget and then, oh, hey, I'm finished. So this is a perfect sort of system to use it for. I've done this for image processing as well. I did a conference talk at NDC London 2020. I think it was, last year. Seems so long ago, doesn't it? Where I had an image processor that we called from a Xamarin app. And it did all of this. So it took a photo from the Xamarin app, that got uploaded, it did some processing to it and returned that app with a whole load of sparkles on it. So we just used some Cloudinary, is it Cloudinary? Yeah, I think so, to jazz up the picture. So we've got the system. What I'm going to do is just come, there we go. Let me just go back because I'll want to come back and show you this picture as we go through. Oh, wrong button, Layla. All right. So I've already got this application open. That's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to. I'm just randomly pressing buttons now. Keep you all on your toes. Okay, so this one, I do have the link to the GitHub repo for this as well. So you don't worry, you can go and have a play, you can pull it down and do all sorts of things you like with it. I have noticed that I've been naughty though. I didn't do the thing I suggested that all of you do. So we can do that now, so you know what I mean. I have my local settings.json. You can see I've got all of this in here and you're like, oh, wait, there's user secrets. Yes, this gets more and more like your normal application that you develop. So I will make sure I copy this into a demo one and upload that to GitHub. Someone remind me at the end that I need to do that. Otherwise you'll be like, what do I need? This processor is the Azure Function project. I also have a Blazor server application. So that's our any old app. If we look at this here, that's our any old app happens to be a Blazor server application. And what we have in here are our 3 triggers. Not that one, this one. But I've got a startup. So this is looking very much more like a regular ASP.NET project. So let's open that and have a look. So yes, you can include a startup file in your function. It does inherit from web jobs. So you need to come over here and use web job startup. It's all wrapped up for you, but that's where it's coming from, a web job startup. So it's nicely wrapped. Notice how this decorator must be outside the namespace, okay? And it must refer to this class here. So just some notes, it will not work. Azure Functions will ignore this if it does not have this line. And then this starts to look, I'll just unpin this now, very much like your regular ASP.NET application. I have some stuff where I go and grab my configuration and, oh, I've got iOptions pattern coming in, so I can use my user secrets and I'm binding all of those. So I've got strongly typed configuration now. And then I start looking at these. Look, I've got services. I have dependency injection, just like any other .NET Core application. This supports .NET Core's dependency injection, which is fantastic because now you can write your application like you normally would. You can have all that, separation of concerns and write really well architected systems. So to answer, was it Sunith who had the question? Here I have my data repositories. So if you wanted to connect to your database, you could do so here. If you're using Entity Framework and that, don't use a singleton, but these are API calls to table context, and I can show you those as well. So I've added all of my services here. I've got an HTTP client. You could use HTTP client factories here as well if you wish. And then just here in the configure app configuration, I need to add some stuff to my builder to tell it to go and use local settings and add environment variables and user secrets to make this all work nicely for local development. So that's our startup. I've got all of these added in here. I've got some helpers here for JSON serialization. Now that's using system.text.json. And there are some caveats around there because that's quite new. Some of the bindings don't like system.text.json. You have to use Newtonsoft. So I have a mishmash of the both in here just to, add that little bit of je ne sais quoi. So if we go back to the Solution Explorer, let's start to have a look at the very first trigger, which is the upload function. So if we have a look back here, we are coming with our upload a file to an upload trigger. And you can see I've got it called upload. I've got this taking a get and a post just to show you that it still can, but this would really just be a post. And then we take in the streamed data because we're going to stream an audio file up to it. And then this goes off to the data repository. So I've got pretty standard architecture here. You could have your services in another project. You don't have to have them all in here. So you could have shared services across multiple applications. So you can keep it nice and dry and reusable. So just as you would any other application, you can extract all of your common, all of your models, your entity types, whatever you want, you can extract those out into another project, architect it just as you like. So in here, I've got some services. If I go into the data, I have table storage and a blob context that I use just as other contexts that you might use for your data. These are all helper library driven, hence why I have them as singletons. So that goes off here and calls the data repository and saves my audio file to my blob storage. So you can see here, it saves the audio file to blob storage. And I'll run this in a minute so you can see it in action. Now, the blob trigger is our next function, and this is a little bit different. So there's a few nuances to the blob trigger. It's very convention based, okay? So you have to get used to working with convention based type stuff, which us as .NET developers usually are quite well trained at being convention based. So you can see I'm using constructor injection here. No problems there. Usually when you create a new function, it's going to be a static. Just whip off those statics. Don't worry about it. It will work fine. So here I've given this a name blob trigger, and very specific to this type of trigger is I'm going to say in my blob, here's a pattern to go and match. Notice that there's not a $sign here. It's not like string interpolation. It's very specific to functions. I tell it which container, what does the file I'm interested look like, pattern, and then what's the thing that changes, the variable, that ID. And then I tell it the name of my connection string in the local.settings.json. Now, there's a caveat here. Let me just stick that out so I don't completely dox that. The blob trigger is only going to look in values. Okay, you can see that I have the storage connection string out here set in user secrets, but because this is so strongly convention based, that blob trigger is only going to look in values. So there are some nuances to working with this. You can get most of the way there with how you like, but then you will get tripped up on various little things. So it has to have the connection string in here, and we have to tell it the name of it. So go and look in values was where it's going to look, and this is the connection string. And then we get the blob out. ID is this one here. So you can see we're asking it, pluck this out and pass it, bind it to this value here. It should be a string and give it to me. So in here then I do some stuff. It goes off to a transcription service. And then that goes off. I have a transcription. If you look down here, I've got transcription common and a transcription. And within that, I have the transcription service. So I've injected that in. It's using that transcription service that's common to the whole application and sending off our transcription. It then gets an ID back. We do some error handling. We save it off to table storage. We make a new record on there saying with the status. And then this is to set up the webhook. So you don't really need to worry about that. I use ngrok to open up my functions publicly. So if I go here, and I go to this tab, I've got ngrok running. It's a free to use thing, but it allows things to tunnel through to your local development. So it's a really useful tool here. So I've got that in here. Sorry, some rustling under my desk. Then I've just got some stuff in here. Now, once the transcription service has done what it needs to do, it's going to call the download function. I've got this one on anonymous, and here, look, rather than an HTTP response or whatever it was, what was it called? I've forgotten. Upload function, HTTP request. I can do model binding direct in here. I've written this, and that's a webhook response. And I know what my transcription service is going to be sending back. And that's this type. Now, this is where one of the nuances, system.text doesn't work. It ignores it. So you can only use Newtonsoft.json decorators here. Otherwise, it will ignore it and you won't get proper binding. Okay. So there's some things there that are convention based. It's very hard cooked. So you just need to bear that in mind when you are working with this. Okay, that you can't maybe use system.text.json. You have to use Newtonsoft.json because it's hard cooked to do that. But that will bind it for you. And then you can come down in here and we'll do some error checking, and then we're going to print the transcription to the screen. And end of process. So let's see it up and running. I'm starting 2 projects here. I'm starting, let me collapse this here. I'm starting the audio processor and I'm starting the Audio Spike Blazor server. And let's go. All right. I have my trusty mic in a mug. Let me just check that mic in a mug is connected. I run this in a VM, so let me just check that mic in a mug. It was not connected. I would have errored then. So mic in a mug is now connected. There we go. And I'm going to record some audio. So that's because mic in a mug wasn't connected when I started. Let me do that. Let's do that. Let me come back up here. Mic in a mug is connected now. So we shouldn't get an error. And then let's go and press record. Hello, good morning to everyone tuning in Florida. I hope you have a beautiful day's weather. All right. So, oh, I forgot to put breakpoints. Let's just put some in here. It's too late for the blob trigger. So let's go and have a look at what's been happening in here. Maybe it wasn't too late. Let's go see the blob trigger. I think it probably is, but we can always do another one. Let's go and watch. All right, so where are we? So when this starts, you can see just as before, we had our endpoints. This one was just post, this one was get and post. And then we have our other triggers that don't have endpoints. They are triggered by something else. So we can list all of those here. And then all of our logging gets put out here. So that's all running. I'd have thought our blob trigger would have gone by now, but let me go and put that down. See, I think that's confusing. Let me close that. And so what we're waiting is for that to fire and do all of that. Now, I would have thought that would be immediate, so I'm just going to stop. That's frozen, let's see. There we go, okay. Don't you just love live demoing? Let me just check. We don't have a CLI. Let's start that up again and make sure that it's all running. Okay, so we've got that. Everything's coming through. We can see here now, we've got those. And if we come back over to here, let's try that again. Please, demo gods, be kind. Okay, so straight away we can see the upload executed. So we hit that. We've hit the blob trigger now. And you can see if I come over and look at the ID, it's pulled out an ID that we created. I'm going to let that go. We've got the URL from our blob storage. And now you can see we've got a transcription ID. We've got some stuff here that I've got written. Now we'll give it a few moments and we should see the download function get hit. If we close that one, let's go here. And we should also see it coming in here. Oh no, the session expired. I missed that bit, so it's not going to work. But I can quickly just restart that. Let's go. Typical. Let me just grab this number here. And I just need to go and update that in the upload function. Oh no, it's the blob trigger. Oh, don't you just love that? That just, I know, live demos are always fun, but it's knowing like where the issues might lie, I guess. So we come down here, I have to just update this for the blob trigger. We don't need multiple dots there, that's all good. I'm just going to restart that. Third time is the charm, you know, folks. So let's go here. Let me check this. Can see we've got it all running. It's ready. It's listening. Third time is the charm, she says. Let's see if she is right. Okay, so straight away we've hit that. Dun, 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 dun. Let's go and see. So we should hit our blob trigger. It's not going to do it this time, is it? It's having a right little, you know, I tested this extensively before coming on here. That's the way. I'll do another one. Let's give it a little shove. Let's try another recording and see if this one will push everything through. It's not how it works, but you know, I'm wishful thinking here. So you can see that one's uploaded successfully. And my blob storage is just going, no. Oh, there we go. It's being slow. So we've got that coming through. We've got that URL. They're both coming through now. And that should go through. And hopefully now, because our ngrok session is running, we should see this a request come through here any moment. There you go. If I show you on here, it's hit the API.download trigger. We can see that this is bound. We've got status completed. Here's the transcription ID. We'll let that go. And then if I bring up the terminal, let that go again. You can see third time is the charm, she says. Let's see if she is right. So you can see there's the whole process. And then you could do whatever you want. You could have another trigger that makes a call to see if the status of this, the table storage is running. So if we go over here, so you'd update the table storage, you'd add the transcription there. So you could have a fourth trigger that you can call from your application to go, hey, is it ready yet? Oh, okay, great. What's the transcription? And you can go and build out this whole complete system. So I hope that's given you a bit of an idea on that. Now, before I move on, does anyone have any questions about the awesome live demo I just gave?
Hey, Layla, yes, I have a question. This is an awesome demo, by the way, and I loved it. Obviously, there are a lot of moving parts to this system. So what is your recommendation for errors? Like, how do you handle errors in the system?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So logging is the first port of call. It's really built into Azure Functions. It's really encouraged to use logging. You can use application insights when you deploy. So if you want to check the system health and handle that, you can totally set that up. Now, logging, like error handling within, just the same as you would on any other application. If you need to have, hey, something's gone really wrong, I actually need to alert member of support. You can go and you can send them an email, or you can trigger all of that in just as you would if you had some kind of complex error handling system that alerts people. You would just wire that in just as you would in any other application. You could even use a send grid function that you call internally to send out emails to relevant people, or use application insights, or you can use an API management service, which I shall get onto. I've seen your question, Praveen. I'm going to address that in just a moment, so just bear with me. So that is the system there. You can start to see how that might be quite good to build, and it's quite a nice accompaniment to other applications. So we've been over to code. So just some thoughts on architecting a solution. It can be structured like any .NET web application, supports .NET Core's dependency injection, supports .NET 5, and try to remember single responsibility. Now, the key thing in that application was, does that back? I don't know how to go back on this. This is, oh, there we go. This upload trigger does one thing. It takes that stream data and writes it to blob storage. It doesn't do any of the other stuff. It doesn't go and send it off to the transcription service. It does one thing. And that's really a key principle to remember when you're building Azure Functions. Just like you would want a single responsibility principle to be applied to your methods, you want that applied to your functions. My function does one thing. The blob trigger, it does one thing. It sends the transcription off and just writes the table. Okay, it needs to write that table, update the table storage ID there, and sends that off. And the webhook does one thing. It writes the transcription to whatever. Okay, so you really want to bear that in mind. You do not want your functions doing too many things because of stuff we're going to come on to. So if I can, why is nothing? This is so unresponsive. Google Slides, not the best thing to use. There we go. So this comes on to our scaling question and things like that. there are several ways that you can use Azure Functions. The most common is going to be the consumption plan, pay as you go. I would recommend this to most of you unless you have specific needs for the premium. Consumption plan pricing includes a monthly free grant of 1 million requests and 400,000 gigabytes of data stuff that it does, and then 15p per million executions. So they are cheap, really cheap, really, 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 really superbly cheap. Let me go down. Oh, you can do testing in these as well. You can, because you've got DI, you can do all sorts of mocking and testing and just as you normally would. So premium, now premium is good if you need it hot all the time. So it provides the same features and scaling mechanisms used on the consumption plan based on the number of events with no cold start. So you've always got it allocated, but then would you not want a web application? So it's built using on the vCPU and memory. Oh, hello. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Let's just stop. You're having a little fun there, are we, Visual Studio? You thought you'd come in and say hello. So it's built, so then you start to think, well, if I'm doing this, should I have a web API application instead? Would I get more versatility into it? This is why I'm saying it's not clear cut whether you use functions or a web API application. People are like, throw away a web API and only use functions. But then, yeah, you may actually need that application there anyway, so you're paying for that compute, which is like £40, so like $50-60 a month, something like that. So now where's my scaling question? Right, okay, so I thought I had scaling in here. Okay, they scale automatically. The consumption plan will scale to 200 instances. Premium will scale to 100 instances. I think I've got links somewhere to the Microsoft Docs. You can tell it to scale. You can manage the scaling, but the default out the box is consumption will keep scaling up to 200 instances and premium up to 100. And they just deal with that all automatically. You don't need to do anything about that. Okay, you just let it do its thing. You can go and set it up if you really need that control, but you want to ask, why not just let it sort itself out? That's kind of the reason why you're using Azure Functions and serverless. Otherwise, you'd be using your own microservice platform. So that's the scaling there is all taken for to you, and it will handle a huge number of requests all automatically. Okay, so if I go on now to here, so security and authorization. I showed you how on the function you could have the authorization key, which is anonymous function admin system and user, and you go in the key and you get your key and you'd send that on the request. Not the most secure thing. So it really depends how much trust your system requires. If you really need it to be trustworthy, I mean, you're sending very sensitive data, for example, and you're not just uploading an audio file or gauge what level of security you need. You may want to use a secure HTTP endpoint. So app service authentication and authorization. So you have like a proxy that handles your authorization and authentication, and then that routes through to your applications internally. You can use Azure API management to authenticate requests. I think pricing on that starts at $1,500 a month. So you need to make sure that this is what you require, that you need that level of trust. And you can deploy your function app in isolation. So they can be in their own little bubble, only accessible from something internally. So like, for example, your blob storage could be only accessible internally because it only needs to look at your blob storage in Azure Functions. And they've just released a new update a couple of weeks ago where they've made that much more easy. So that they can just be internally facing, and security is a lot easier to deal with. So there's some thoughts there. So further reading, there is the docs, which gives you a lot of information. If you want to know about configuration, there's a good blog here on configuration. So that's like the user secrets aspect of it. And I mentioned about the cold starts, and is that really a problem? I think not. So you can go and read this blog on cold starts, and it shows you a lot of charts and does a lot of the timings for you, so you can make an informed decision. So thank you very much for tuning in. Those are my details. You can follow me there. This is an octopus, by the way, so this is supposed to be GitHub. I didn't have an icon for GitHub that matched. So this is on this repo is on GitHub. My slides are here, bit.ly LP-AZ-funk. So then you can get all access to this. Yeah, I know we're just over 9 a.m. So yeah, there you go. I'm hoping that has answered a lot of your questions. But if you have any questions, I am ready to take them right now. Praveen, how is concurrency handled? Concurrency, what, in multiple instances? Is that what you mean when I have multiple instances? Oh, thank you. Thanks, Betsy. See you. Thank you, Elena. See you. So Sanjay, WebJob. WebJob is kind of, I guess, a more old school way of doing it. You'd have a web job to go clean up your data. You'd have that. I mean, Azure functions are kind of built on top of Azure functions. I think they're easier to deploy. They're easier to, they're serverless, they're managed for you, whereas web jobs, when I haven't used web jobs for quite some time, you need to manage a lot more of that yourself. You need to deploy that. You need to manage the system a lot more because you've got those on there. I guess it's a cron job. Azure functions are just easy and free and really easy to get started with for the most part. So I can't clarify the key differences between them. They are quite similar, but I think Azure functions give you a lot more on top of those, because a web job, as far as my understanding of them, is really just a console application that they'll go and process things, and Azure functions will handle web requests and all sorts of things. So they do have a lot more to them. I mean, so yeah, there's is there a cost difference? I don't know how much a web job costs, so you'd have to go and have a look at that yourself. So I don't know. I've not been looking into web jobs of late, so I can't tell you that. So how did I manage to record audio in Blazor? It was awesome. I was looking for something. I did use a JS interrupt. So I actually did a whole streaming series on that. So you can go and look at that. I have this mic component here. And if I go and have a look at that code, you can see there's quite a few different things here. I have to load various scripts. I used web audio recorder JS. So it was all JS interrupt, and custom rate all of that. See, this is all, this project is Blazor audio spike. So you can go and find it. And you can see I have mic.js, which shows you how I go and grab the audio from Blazor. So you can do that. Also, my good friend Ed Charbonneau did a webcam version of that. So you can see that I've got the webcam component in there if you need that. Let me go and do that now. Let me go and grab this from GitHub, save you all rooting around. So let's come in here. And this is this one. Let me drop that in. And there's another one that that's my ngrok thing. That's absolutely no use to anybody, is it? Okay, there you go. There's the audio spike. You can go and have a, please feel free to clone it, play with it, give me feedback on it. Now, if I go down here, I have a lot of different little fun functions in here, like the Yoda translator, Ginventory, pirate translation function. There's a lot of just fun little functions I have. Now, the photo processor function is very similar to this, and I will share that with you here. But this one goes and does some photo processing, and this one also used polling instead of a webhook. So if you want to know how to set up polling, you can see that in here. So your application would poll this download instead. So there's a few different things in there. I will just grab this link as well. So I can drop that, save you rooting around and hand typing it. There's the link to my, come on, to my, no, it didn't copy. Okay, thank you. Let's try it again. There you go. So there's the link to the slides. So you can go in, that's an actual link to this Google slide deck. So you can go and have a play in there. So yeah, sorry I couldn't answer with more clarity on the web jobs, but I don't know. So there's a great place to go and start on the Microsoft Docs. They tell you all about the scaling and how to customize that, why you might, there are a few other pricing plans, self-hosted, for example. Go and have a look. Durable functions, you may want to have a look at that. They can be quite expensive, but if you need some kind of orchestration for a system, that's the way to go. But yeah, hopefully that was all inspiring you to go and get started. I'm going to smile until someone comes and says something now.
Thank you, Layla. Wonderful talk. I think I loved the transcription service demo. It was awesome.
I think it just shows how you can actually use these in practice. It's one thing for me just to do like, hey, here's a file new, but it doesn't get the brain ticking over. So I love to show these big systems. I love building them. So I enjoy sharing them as well.
Have you tried, actually, let me do this. Just so you're not hanging out over there all by yourself.
Solo Layla. We can be
Yeah.
purple t-shirt friends.
Yes. Yeah. So have you heard of or tried the Kubernetes event-driven CADA with Azure Functions?
I haven't, but as we were talking about Santosh earlier, I'm going to be starting to learn a good deal about Kubernetes, so that's going to come onto my list. I think the way I've approached functions is that I want what microservices gives you without having to actually think about how the DevOps side of it and all of that goes on the other. That I can just come as a developer, write an application, and Azure does all that really complex stuff that I don't really know how to do. So that's kind of what I quite like about it. You can get a lot of functionality without a lot of extra learning. So I think that, if you're already a competent developer and you've got a good idea, you can come into Azure Functions, and as long as you know that where the tripping up is, like the very strongly opinionated convention-based side of it, I think you can really get a lot of functionality for very little input.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm also hoping to get ramped up on. So that should be, I think it's but the other cool part I like about functions is all the different triggers. It's like,
yeah,
you practically take any Azure service and you probably have a trigger for it in Azure Functions, which is really convenient. You don't have to write.
It is really good, like the Cosmos DB one, the blob storage one. There's so many applications for it. And this is it. You don't, it does it for you. You don't have to go and do all that, like going and checking it's there. It's just, it's all integrated. It's such a lovely system.
Yep. So what time is it over there for you?
It is 2:15. I'm 5 hours ahead of you.
Oh, 5 hours. All right. Cool. Cool. Awesome. You got anything, Todd? You're on mute.
We could lip read.
I do want to start playing with this. I just started a new job a couple of weeks ago, and it's all the application's built entirely as it's basically it's a rules engine, but the rules engine is built into the application. It really would be nice to build these rules into functions that could be invoked by the web application. It would just pull, there's just a lot of plumbing and a lot of,
yeah.
I don't know, it would be much easier to do this. And it would take the burden off of the web application.
Yeah, that's it, because it's all put off there. If it's not needed, it's not costing you anything. It's not costing you compute. It's just sitting there. Oh, I'm needed. Okay, here you go.
Well, not only that, but like you said, what you said at the beginning of it, it's all, we can all version manage it and publish it as necessary. I mean, that's huge. So
yeah.
Oh, by the way, I actually have an answer for the web job question, because
cool.
I've used web jobs and functions. So web jobs is basically, console applications that you run as part of, Azure Web Apps. Like you host it in Azure Web Apps and run web jobs. So it doesn't have any of the inbuilt bindings, and all of that. It has no scaling capability. It can only scale to the whatever you provision that web app for. So, if you, provisioned a certain amount of compute, that's all it'll scale for. So basically it's like running a console application in the cloud. It's really convenient, but it's also not, modern cloud per se. It's just,
it will do a cleanup for you, for example, if you need that. But do you need that? Can you just provision those, or does it need to be on like a machine? Is that on, like, do you need a whole machine on that, or can it be like on an application base? Because I always think that you actually, to run a web job, you need a VM rather than like an application. So you've got all the cost of a VM.
No, you don't need a VM. You basically, you run it as part of the Azure Web App. You deploy it and run it as part of the Azure Web App.
Yeah.
Web Jobs was originally created when Azure Web Apps came out, but before Azure Functions did. So, kind of like the early teens, I guess, about 8 years back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Since Function has been around for 6 years, I guess. So about 7-8 years back is when web jobs, it was kind of like the glue from running console applications and VMs to going to Azure Functions. It's kind of like the in-between sweet spot for that. So
Santosh, I would like to add up something on web jobs. So it's more like if you want to run background jobs, like cron jobs, some tasks like that, and you can use web jobs. And the interesting thing is the whole function runtime was built on top web jobs SDK. So even if you see like you're adding some of the triggers, like with V3, all the triggers do not come out of the box, right? You need to add the Nugget packages specific to those triggers. So these are actually built on top of the web jobs SDK. So this was the base for the full function runtime.
That's an excellent point. Yes, thank you for adding that. Yes. Yeah, so what I would recommend is, if you're starting greenfield, just start with functions. Like, don't even mess around with web jobs.
You've got all your timer triggers and that, so it's nice and easy in there.
Right.
And free.
Free, yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I mean, you provision Azure Web App, and it costs money. It always consumes a certain amount of resources, regardless of whether you use it or not. It's just sitting out there eating your money. And with Azure Functions, it's a pay per use, so you don't. I think you get charged for the storage, but other than that, which is pretty low. So other than that, I don't think you incur any charges on Azure Functions, especially the consumption model, unless you run it. Speaking of which, the cold start, you mentioned that it's part of, as premium, you don't incur that, or it's better for addressing the cold start issue. I've seen some people use the consumption model, and they just have like a function sitting in there that basically is kind of like a ping timer type thing that keeps the function warmed up. Now, what do you think about that? Is that like an anti-pattern, or is that good to use? Or?
People often ask this, because you've got Azure Front Door, you can use timer things. Read the article that I've got. Let me get the link to it, because I don't think it's necessary. That's the thing. It's I just don't think it's. Let me go. I don't think you need to keep them live and warm or anything. If you go through this, it really highlights that because they're pre-warmed, it's tiny amounts of seconds. And if you have got a lot of jobs going, they're going to be up anyway. If you've got that much traffic, they're going to be live and you don't have to worry about it. They won't have had time to go to sleep and have a nap.
Right. I think one of the things I've seen with Azure Functions is people use the HTTP trigger part, and what happens is it goes into they come across the cold start issue, and then they say Azure Function sucks because it's not, my HTTP triggers are not responding on time. So that's one of the anti-patterns I've seen in the industry. So
yeah. If you need it, go premium. Then it's always there. It's always available. But you have to ask, what are you doing that needs that response? Okay, maybe you do need it, but if you don't, the few moments it takes for it to come online shouldn't matter. And I think we need to have like a little bit more patience sometimes. It's like, why do you need that response like half a millisecond faster or whatever half a second faster? I think it's like 3 seconds for them to boot up. 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. And like,
but if you do need that, pay for it. I mean,
exactly.
I mean, I know as developers, we like everything for free. I get that. But if you can wait 3 seconds, you can have it free.
Exactly.
So the way I look at it is I see Azure Functions more as a rocket and not like a race car. So, if you can probably go as high as you want, but there's an initial cold start where it'll be the takeoff takes a while, but then it goes a longer distance, or it goes higher or whatever it is. So that's kind of the analogy that I use for Azure Functions.
Layla makes a good point too. If you've got enough traffic, it's probably always want to be warm.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Hey, I got an app here that takes 25 seconds for a search, so 3 seconds is fast for me.
Yeah, I think it also depends on, especially if you have an application and you have an SLA saying that, I want my API to respond in 200 milliseconds, then Azure Functions is horrible for that. Don't use Azure Functions, just use like, Azure Web Apps. That's going to be faster. So
there's a place for them.
Right.
This is it. You just need to analyze what do you need, what are your priorities, and then choose the right application for it. Because that may be a web API, it may be functions, maybe something completely different.
Yeah.
I'd like to add one more thing, Santosh. You can also run your function inside an web app. Inside an app service. So if you have unpredictable traffic, then you can always go for that.
Okay. I have never tried that myself, but it makes sense because they pretty much seem to be the same type of. They're both created by the app service team, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I'm not quite sure that there is a dedicated functions team, but there are, as I said, there's other ways that you can host them. You can host them on an app service, you know, or you can have them on, you know, other things like the Kubernetes, as we said. There are other deployments. It still all comes down to why. If you've got them on a web application, you know, you could have the full beans web API, not have to deal with the convention restrictions. If you've already got a web app running, you may as well stick other things on it, or you may go up to a full VM and have complete control. It really always boils down to, it depends on what your use cases are, and what you need from them. And you know, if you're running Azure Front Door, I mean, I think that sits on a web app. You need a web app for that, but that would keep it there is stuff about keeping that hot with that link I shared on the Silicon Orchid blog. He talks about Azure Front Door as a part of that. Oh no, that's the wrong link again. It's because I copy from my VM to my host, and it's like doesn't like it. There you go. So there's some discussion in there about Azure Front Door and how you can use that to keep site functions hot. But I mean, it's not an anti-pattern. It's just kind of, as such, there's a bit of anti-pattern in there, but it's just like, you've just got to ask yourself, why? Start with why. Why do you need it hot, hot, hot?
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else have any questions or anything else you want to add? I mean, it's a great conversation in here.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you for coming, Layla.
Well, thank you
thank
so
you very
much for
much.
having me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. So you know what we'll do is this talk has been it's recorded, and I posted the YouTube link on this chat. So if you haven't copied that, copy the YouTube link. I'll post and subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe, because if we get 200 people, I think we get to have our own custom URL. So
You do, if you got 100, yeah.
and we don't have 100, so it'd be nice to have that. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Please.
So yeah, I'll right now, I'm in a small town up in North Florida, so I don't have the speed to upload those YouTube videos yet. So I will upload that when I get back sometime later this week, and it'll be there. And so yeah, I think this was a awesome talk, and we may do more morning meetings, Layla. We thank you for, we have generally been doing evening meetings, but we wanted to make sure that we accommodated your time zone, so we did a morning meeting, and this turned out great. So we may do more of these in the
This is, I
future.
think, our second morning meeting, and it's actually been a lot of attendees, which is great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, I have a, because we work in work from home, all day meeting scenario. I have a meeting starting in 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
having
much.
me.
Yeah.
Lovely to come and join you for your morning
Come to
sessions.
Central Florida next time. Stop and see us.
I will. I'm hoping to come at some stage if I can travel again.
Yeah. So we may have Orlando Code Camp next year. So we hopefully, if we have it, you can come and speak at Orlando Code
Spring
Camp.
in Florida is very nice.
Yeah.
I'm up for that. I've done New York Code Camp before, and I think I'd like to come Florida Code Camp then.
go.
So that would be good.
Sounds
So
like
send me an invite.
I will. We will. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Take care, folks.
Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Bye.